And the Trump administration will no longer accept migrants fleeing domestic abuse or gang violence as asylum seekers. The decision was announced by Attorney General Jeff Sessions earlier this week. In explaining the news, Sessions declared, quote, "Asylum was never meant to alleviate all problems, even all serious problems that people face every day all over the world." Sessions' announcement comes just days after the United Nations determined the Trump administration's policy of separating migrant children from their parents is a violation of international law. For more, we turn to immigration attorney Allen Orr. Mr. Orr, let me start by throwing the Attorney General's words at you. Is it true that asylum was never meant to protect people fleeing domestic abuse and gang violence? I mean, what's the international precedent on this?
Well, I think it's important to sort of look at the history of how it got included after World War II by the Netherlands for the social group category, and then sort of understand American policy and law of saying that when the Constitution was originally ratified, it didn't include African Americans, minorities, or women. So over time, I'm telling you that the courts and through a progression in civilization, it became included in the asylum remedies. And then for 20 years, it was included. So what Jeff Sessions basically did was a unilateral change in immigration law to impact the backlog of numbers, but that's really not what was accomplished. So yes, it was intended for that. It grew to be intended for that category of individuals. And
can you share with us any stories of people, for example, you currently work with who would be impacted by this decision? How many lives are we looking at to be impacted by this policy?
So the current backlog is 700,000 cases in this arena, and we know that 74% of those cases are related to gang violence and domestic abuse. So that's a large category, right? But those cases aren't immediately cleared out. What has happened is that Jeff Sessions sent a message to CBP officers at the port of entry to evaluate people differently for a credible fear. So it really didn't leave that. So every case, every immigration attorney has a client that's going to be impacted by this today and in the long term. But the problem is that what's happening now is that just like all the other major immigration fights in this country, it's going to go into federal court and then drag on to the Supreme Court to get a final resolution. So basically, it's just more court clog that is sort of hampered here, and all of our clients are impacted. And everyone, the thousands of immigrants that come to our border to lawfully apply for asylum will be impacted by this in the long run and may eventually cause death and harm.
You mentioned the fact that Sessions justifies this policy by saying it will help in backlogs in the court. What will be the impact in the court?
So we're already assuming now that once these cases are sort of denied, I mean, it really depends on how they reach individuals, right? So if you're at the border and they're turning away people, you know, and they go before an immigration judge and they have been informed by Jeff Sessions that they cannot hear a credible fear based on gang violence or domestic abuse, and then they're turned away, they probably won't have that big of a remedy. But individuals who are currently in the court system, who have court dates now to have their cases heard before a judge, and then the judge denies it, will have a day in federal court. So what that does is move the 700,000 backlog from these immigration courts into federal court. And then that will also log on for years until there's a resolution to this. But what's most important to understand about this is this is out of step with international policy. This is once again where America is stepping outside a policy that everyone has sort of developed for refugees and asylum law. And this is going to make the U.S. look like a horrible country, basically.
On that note, I want to get your reaction to a recent report in the Boston Globe, which highlights the struggle of migrant children at the border. The article names one public defender who says several of her clients have told her their children were taken away from them by Border Patrol agents who said they were going to give them a bath. And then after hours passed, it dawned on these mothers that the kids were not coming back. How does the Trump administration justify separating children from their parents? And do you believe this policy is legal? I mean, the United Nations, for one, says it's not.
Well, I don't believe the policy is necessarily legal, and what they have done is a sort of work around current law. So they can't hold kids for more than 21 days. So they can't hold kids, and so what they've decided to do was to separate the mother from the kids, and therefore they can release the kids, but then continue to detain the parent, which is sort of breaking down the family nucleus of these individuals that we were already talking about that are battered, are running from gang violence. So this is a solution that they're putting forward in hopes that the numbers at the border will decrease. And what we've seen in the last month is that the numbers have actually increased. So this is not the appropriate solution in the human arena or in the global arena for this problem.
Finally, about 30 seconds left. All of this news comes as the Trump administration is reportedly wanting to build a tent city in El Paso, Texas, to house between 1,000 and 5,000 migrant children. If you were advising the government, Mr. Orr, how would you suggest they deal with the issue of migrant families?
Well, rather than build prisons, it would be better to just aid the families at the port of entry to give them the wraparound care they need and then release them and let them come back for their court dates, because it actually costs more to detain these families, both in the global spectrum, in the goodwill spectrum, as well as in the pocket, than it is to release these individuals into the United States and then sort of deal with them on a case-by-case analysis as the law requires.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Attorney Allen Orr.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.